Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show, another must-listen to show to add to the list. This is You Are Not Ones and Zeros Part 2. Before we go into music and the show, the world as it is today wears stupidity like a Medal of Honour. And perhaps this poem defines who is a man and who isn't. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings, and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they have gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that is in it. And, which is more, you'll be a real man. Hi all and welcome to the interlude of today's show. This is an additional subset of information based on the first show of You Are Not Ones and Zeros, You Are the Light. And it covered various deep topics that brought up deep emotions, a roller coaster of them, up and down, plunges and then zoomed back up, that created a whirlwind of emotions, and that is normal when information on that level is brought forth into the light. The main part of the information in that show came to me long before THI started, and also my involvement with Kim and the Trust. But those levels of information needs to be put out at the right time, and fed in small spoonfuls first before you use the big spoon, so to speak. I've carried that information around for a while, and certain portions of it have certainly been added into the mix since THI started. But as I've said, timing is everything. Had I done that show back in May 2016, its point, purpose and attempting to grasp it would have been lost on all but one handful of listeners. People often ask me to write a book, yet miss the point our whole show from May 2016 onwards, plus the 3 mustn't listen to episodes when I was on Cosmic Voice, is a book in and of itself. The must listen to shows is a giant cosmic and earth library of sorts, so listening to the last show without hearing the first, The Future of Humanity, will render the listener lost. Even those who have been with me from day one, July 31st, 2013, found elements of that previous show hard to grasp and required several listens and deep ponderings. So what chance do new listeners have in those circumstances? None is the answer. And this is why I ask all new to THI to go and listen to all the must listen to shows in order. You wouldn't go to a store to buy a book and turn to read the end chapter first. You start at the beginning to know the story before the ending. But our story has not run its full course yet, and we still have an undetermined amount of chapters to unfold on our journey of discoveries, the truth, and understanding our role in life. Right, here goes. Programs. Programming plays a deep role in our lives that many people want to admit to themselves or on a wider basis. The perception is in life that bad things always happen to somebody else, and your fears in and of life plays heavily into those events happening and often repeating. Living in a bubble world is no different to being in the sleeping pods whilst the planet was being reset. You cannot live life in a slumber. And more importantly, you cannot go through life ignoring the plight of others. It is humanity's biggest crime, whereby a problem or situation that is not on your doorstep is not your problem or concern. And yet many speak of consciousness without an awareness of what it really entails. Consciousness affects us all simultaneously. So if the people of, say, Iraq are in turmoil, struggle and strife, their collective consciousness circles around the globe and affects you. That's how it works. It is no different to how nature works. It is symbiotic. And as we have said frequently on this show, once you see the pattern, it always repeats. As an example, the People's Club manifesto of the cooperative business, which has proven to work if people work with it, not at it. But it also applies as a social model, a psychological model, and can ultimately lead to a political model. It can apply to the banking model, it can apply to the global military model, and it can also apply in working with on and off-planet beings who are not terrestrial. Why does it work in so many fields? Because the consciousness behind it is supported by nature and also source. Caring and sharing, working together in harmony. Just those two aspects raises the levels of consciousness higher again. And almost overnight we have a better world. But the programming kicks in. The idea it only happens to somebody else, like MK Ultra. The perception is that it happened just to super soldiers or other military or agency-based personnel only. Not realising what you're saying or stating. No, it happened to ordinary people. What you're saying is it is in part okay that they went through that because they are military or super soldiers and that was part of their training, albeit brutal. You are applying it to the boxes. And because you're not in that box, equals it doesn't apply to you. Wrong thinking and a common mistake. But it's also a denial tactic, a protection shield if you like, and it is your way of not facing it, to rationalise it in such a way that you don't have to take responsibility for it. MK Ultra is and happens for us all. Propaganda, or pro-pagan Dar, the real term, is MK Ultra. You do realise that now, don't you? If you didn't, you know now. How is the media MK Ultra, you may ask? Because they're not telling you the truth, and subsequently creating a negative frequency vibration for all of us to absorb is what? It permeates everywhere and seeps into your thinking and reaction patterns and wreaks havoc within our surroundings. And in essence, it affects the consciousness. Television affects the consciousness and subsequently is also an MK Ultra program. Look at the drivel that is on it. You've got news spouting bullshittery, riddled with lies, agendas and inharmonic frequencies, largely like the Weather Channel, which is run by IBM, or IWASM, to put people in fear and corral them into their way of thinking, which is, to all intents and purposes, is actually retarded. That is a harsh word, some will say. Take your blinkers off and look at what passes as entertainment. The TV was not created for your entertainment. Take an E and a T, E-T, out of entertainment, which is symbolic in so many ways, and what you're left with is what it was designed for. Not entertainment, but entrainment. The fact that those two letters taken out is a pointer. Now, I could spend all night about a plethora of shows, and we did cover some of them in the last show, but a few examples I caught recently. A couple of guys doing a pain show where they get bitten by snakes and spiders and all other things poisonous for entertainment, and yet people watch that crap. It's entrainment. Jerry Springer, a show of what the Vedas would have called a group of derelicts cussing, spitting and fighting each other over some other derelict boy or girlfriend. Look at me, I'm famous, I'm on TV, and watch me drag some girl's hair out. Personally, I look at it with contempt and quickly switch the channel if I catch a glimpse of it. But that adulation and fame will be attained at any length, it seems, with the masses, regardless of how they look or act, and people watch it because in some way they feel they are superior to those on the TV, because they wouldn't act that way. But you are missing the point. By watching it, in essence, you become them. They dragged you down to their level as you are a participant, and you allowed that show to proliferate. Because you participated, you became a statistic. Statistics create ratings, and if sufficient follow it, the program keeps running because you complied. So it's us that creates those banal programs, not them. And when you realise they run these programs to literally take the piss out of us, and how easily humanity complies with it, then their hilarity goes up a notch at our expense. So we circle back to what was said earlier. Consciousness affects us all simultaneously. Participant or not, it still affects the all. Recognizing that and applying it in your everyday life is a key to understanding thee and our future. Actions or inactions both have an effect and are part of the cosmic battle on many levels, including the battle between light and dark. You have to recognize the interconnectedness of it all to get to the root of the problem. Once you realize the problem, only then can the solutions be manifested and applied. Now, some may ponder or ask the question, so what you're saying is if I watch the Jerry Springer show, I'm part of the problem. It's only a show. A classic line of denial that it's only. Let's look at an example of it's only, shall we? Like Benghazi. Hillary basically stated it's only 4 people who died. What does it matter? But since then, thousands of others have died in various circumstances, largely to stifle what really went on in Benghazi. Whilst it may have only been 4 people, the consequences of that incident affected millions, and still does to this day. So you see how the it's only doesn't work when facing reality. The cause and effect of one incident on our planet on any given day, time or location has the subsequent effect to then affect the all. People watched the Springer show and it had a bad negative effect because it created a plethora of other banal public-based shows like Big Brother. Big Brother is about people watching people who are in the TV whilst those in the TV watch the TV themselves. Oh dear. Does that make any sense? And yet millions watched it. The whole point of that show for the viewer is to wait for 2 participants to fight or have sex, is it not? That is voyeurism. Voyeurism is the Big Brother show. Then Big Brother, not the show, turns the tables and becomes let's voyeuristically spy on us all. Can you see the pattern now? In the first show we mentioned the moon and its connectedness to the occult, religion and practices of the dark, and the big revelation of how the female aspect fell and was bound to the moon, including their menstrual cycle. It caused quite a trigger, which was expected. But the trigger was not because you rejected it, but because it hit an inner nerve or chord. Chord being the operative word. It hit the chord. Which is an unaddressed wound that runs very deep into the core of the female species. The mother wound, as it is called. In psychological terms, the mother wound more often affects the male. An abusive mother then creates a loop that then is often repeated on the male side in future relationships. How often does an abused male done by the mother lead to the male finding a female partner that is not only looks like the mother, but also acts like her as well? This is known as Stockholm Syndrome, whereby the person falls in love with the abuser, hostage, or sexual crimes, and even stalkers. Like Agneta Falskog of ABBA fame. She was tormented by a stalker for years. She ended up marrying him, ironically in Stockholm. But it didn't last long, as that marriage was not based in love, but fear. And this is symbolic of unaddressed inner core wounding, whereby the abuser is then protected, supported, and in some cases they fall in love with them. In overview, it's bizarre. Yet the frequent occurrence of it means it shouldn't be ignored and it has to be addressed. The term Stockholm Syndrome came in 1973, and the hostage situation in Stockholm when 4 hostages were taken during a bank robbery. The hostages defended their captors after being released and would not agree to testify in court against them. This brings in the 2 emotions we operate by on this planet, and every interaction is based on one or the other, fear or love. And the key to self-mastery, all inner work, your love life, your prosperity and your interactions is, which one do you feed? Most people on this planet live in the fear aspect. They are Smiths in the Matrix terms, happy to go into boxes to fit in with the masses based on fear of not fitting in. But who said you have to fit in? Nobody. You did that to yourself. You allowed them to program you into a box. And it's like the old saying, if I asked you to put your hand in the fire, would you? Most would answer no. So why do you allow them to tell you what to do or say, what to watch, decide what is normal, and run a control system on you? Where is your input into it? Without your input, you are allowing them to use and abuse you on all levels. That is what you are personally are telling them. You are giving them consent to do with you as they wish, because you had no input. But if I don't go along with that, Thomas, I will lose my partner, friends or family. All of which I fully understand. Trust me, I've been through it, all of it. But then you are living life in fear, not love, aren't you? Doing that. If your opinion, lifestyle, ideals, goals are not supported by partners, friends or family, in reality, from an overview perspective, you have lost them already, have you not? If they're not in sync with you, you have already lost them. Who gave them the right to decide how you should live, think or act? You did, by complying to their wishes. you didn't retain your own sovereignty. Why do they have a right to control you? They don't. Do you control what they say or do? In most cases, no. Then why do you allow them to do it to you? It's fear mode again. In a world of statistical analysis, where more is better, more is right in their world. But if one person out of 1,000 tells the truth and 999 believe the lie, who is right and who is wrong? All 1,000 are wrong if the one standing in the truth bows to the 999. That one person who stands in the truth must stand firm to their onslaught, for they, the masses, operate in fear-based emotions, and they have no right to tell you any different. You have to stand in your own sovereignty and not bow to their bully boy tactics, or you will end up with Stockholm Syndrome of protecting those who attack you for telling and being in the truth. Why is life always so one-sided? The mainstream media give their opinions based on scripts given to them. And people believe it because it's the authority. Forgetting it is you who are your own authority, not some jackass Jobsworth with no idea of how life works. You give your opinion, but you get attacked. Who gave them the right to attack you? When they never attacked the so-called official narrative or the authority. Because if they question the official narrative, that puts them in fear, not love. Who said the mainstream media is the truth? Nobody. You allowed it to be your truth due to laziness of not finding out for yourselves. You consented to them imbuing you with falsehoods and also negative frequencies. This then plays into the deeper fears and something that came up in the first show of the prospect of 85% of our planet are bots, synths, clones, inorganic or host-possessed entities. The fear of that is palpable, and it's also fully understandable. But let's look at it in overview. The majority of people never interact with over 99% of the people on this planet. Only within a relatively small circle. So why is this such a difficult and hard topic to face up to? Well, there's a few factors to this. Fear is the main overriding aspect of it, but also our tendency to focus on what we have lost and not what we have gained. And the question to be asked, is it not the case for many of you who will listen to this show? You have already lost 85% or more of the people within your own circle. So they have already gone from your life. And this is eerily like technology and plans of the cabal, is it not? Considered to be a future event when it's already in the past. 85% of people around you have already gone, for many of you. You lost the 85% already. You are all still here, all still retained your sanity, and many of you are flourishing because you were cut adrift or you were pushed out. You flourished because those people were holding you back. You have found your inner freedom and have gained so much. So why is the focus on what you lost and not what you have gained? Well, death is the primary driver of that particular program. We have lost loved ones, people say, which is a funny term to use. We have lost something, suggesting it may one day be found again, which could be true, which could be also a coping mechanism in and of itself. But the focus is we have lost people. But how can you have lost them? They are retained within your own memory bank. And all it takes for them to reappear is for you to access a memory of them. And you will have a vast volume of memories to draw on that makes those lost reappear. Do you stop to remember not what you have lost by that person dying, but what you gained from interacting with them in your life? Too few do, and therein lies the problem. Focusing on what is lost is a victimhood program that is very difficult to shift once that becomes ensconced within your core essence. It plagues you for the rest of your life. It then encompasses how you be in life, how you interact with life, and subsequently, if left unaddressed, erodes or destroys your life. But let's circle back a bit of what was mentioned earlier and humanity's biggest crime. Ignoring the plight of others. Most people do it, or have done it, myself included. Although I'm trying to address that with these shows. So we ignored the plight of humanity as the standard process and the actions of people, and yet now suddenly someone says 85% may not be what you thought they were and could potentially disappear. Then suddenly people become concerned for the 85%, when most barely concern themselves with less than 100 people. Why the sudden flip-flop in reactions? We ignored their plights for all of our lives, most of us. And then someone says potentially they may disappear, and oh my God, the fear kicks in. The causes of that thinking is yet again based in fear. And the question that people are really pondering on is not the 85%, but the one themselves. What if I am one of the 85%? What will happen to me? Be honest. But if you've really tuned into yourself, you already have the answer. Not from me, from you. We spoke about the 12 plus 1 in the first show that renders astrology kind of mute and void in many aspects when one of the zodiacs is missing. And we've also spoken about the 12+1 and the missing month as well. There used to be 13 months, not 12. It used to be 13 months of 20 days here at one point in time. 260 days for the year. So here is some additional background information that may give you pointers of who ran that 13, now 12 program. Did you know the Jewish calendar is lunar and solar? And it is year 5780 now. Did you know the Islamic calendar is also lunar and has 354 days, less 11 days, 1 again, compared to the Gregorian? It is 1441 now, proving Islam, Hebrew and Christian are all one and the same moon-based cult. Did you know that the Ethiopian calendar is still 13 months and it's year 2013 now? Ethiopia is significant, as listeners to From Russia with Love will attest to. Ethiopia was the home of the fourth and last Garden of Eden and their Kalimar people exiled out of India and various other countries along the way. Modern day Ethiopia is run heavily to this day, not by Africans, but by the Jewish Hebrew peoples. And their current New Year's Day is not January the 1st. But before we reveal what that date is, their new year is marked by and has been associated traditionally with the return of the Queen of Sheba to Ethiopia. Why? Following her visit to King Solomon in Jerusalem circa 980 BC. And it is said that the Queen of Sheba was also the Queen of Egypt and Ethiopia, and so proving further the connections of Egypt and Solomon as revealed in the From Russia with Love series. Now, the Queen of Sheba is depicted as jet black in certain pictures, resembling the jet black peoples of the Kalimar worshippers in India. But maybe this next line will give a pointer to her. Ashkenazi incantations commonly depict the Queen of Sheba as a seductive dancer. Until recent generations, she was popularly pictured as a snatcher of children and a demonic witch, which sounds eerily like the depictions of Lilith to me. The date of their New Year's Day, it's September the 11th. Of course, which is also a ritual sacrifice day, much to the Americans and other people's cost on that fateful day 19 years ago. A real Holocaust for many. Holocaust means sacrificial death by fire. As Egypt and their connections has just been mentioned, this ties in nicely with our next piece, which brings in time, the penis, the vagina, and the symbolic 1 and 0 in reference to the sexual organs. The much revered worship of Osiris. Iris is a reference to the single eye. In the scriptures, it is stated that Osiris had his penis cut off. Penis, though often used in slang terms, is said to have the single eye also. There is certainly a number of children's cartoons with characters that resemble a penis with just one eye, including the aptly named characters called the Minions. Coincidence? I think not. All obelisks around the world are the penis phallic symbology of Osiris. His partner was Isis, twin SS, and is the origin of the name of the country of Switzerland. Who runs Switzerland? The Rothschilds. Who holds the Ring of Solomon? The Rothschilds. Which country became the reference for timepieces? Switzerland. Osiris and Isis and their son known as Horus, which is an anagram of hours and more references to time. Horus's father was also known as Ra, so Osiris was Ra. The Eye of Providence, or more commonly known as the All-Seeing Eye, so the iris was the eye of Horus. But when you know the meaning of OS before iris, then it all becomes much clearer, as you will see. Oz means God. Osiris means the eye of their god, which is Ra. The elites do the hand sign of the circle over the single eye and the iris, symbolizing the penis and the vagina again. The circle over the eye is representing the fall of woman, the eye, which is the one, and symbolizing the penis piercing through the vagina. The eyes have it, they say. Is it eyes, or is it the letter eyes? Eye is the one, and penis shaped. The circle in front of the eye is the vagina. This is what they're doing with the symbology. And it's up to you to decide whether that fits or not. It's up to you to know that, or is it you? Do you know that, or is it you, the sheep, to know that? Do you hear? If you don't, are you here? The final thing on this section before the music break is the saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. But given their worship of penises and Osiris, perhaps they are really telling us the penis is mightier than the sword. We will have more on swords later, but the next part of this show is about time. Right, let's get into more of the meat of the show, so we say. There are other symbols of time, or a division of time, which was referenced in the first show, which is called a tide. And so the next part, which seemingly are not interconnected, but actually are, is time, the moon, money, water, and tides. In their wisdom to start another divide and conquer program, it was the Catholic Church, along with their Swiss counterparts, that brought in the division of time programs we see today. Time as in hours and minutes. Time as in calendars, which broke up the earth into cycles of months and time. In celestial terms of the zodiacs, time as in space. All are and can be seen as divisions of time. Now, the origin of the word calendar perhaps brings us some clues of the connections I've just stated. Calendar from Latin calendarium, account book. From calendae, spelt with a C, or calendae, spelt with a K, the calends, which is the first day of a Roman month when debts fall due and accounts were reckoned. This is from calere, to announce solemnly, to call out, as the priests did in proclaiming the new moon that marked the calends. That was all from the description of calendar. So that is time, the moon, and money, all from one word. The divisions of time were creating cycles and loops of it, and it all boiled down to the invention of the watch, said for you to be able to tell the time. But the name of that technology gives it all away when you think different. They developed the watch and time to keep the watch on us. It can also be seen as the beginning of technology being weaponized to spy and control us. When you understand and think on and about all new technology as a weapon to use against us, you then begin to grasp the concept of what they're up to. Timekeeping is another way to keep tabs or control of us. But tabs is another term related to money as well. It's also another conditioning tool, as the days, weeks and months are programmed into us, with the vast majority oblivious to its real meaning, and so time subsequently passes them by in a whirlwind of time-stamped programs. Time for school, time for work, time for college, time for a job, time for marriage, time for children, time for grandchildren, time for a higher paying job, time for a college fund for the children, time for a pension for the old age. It's the time-based cycle of life, and no time for the self and or others. With the majority of those time-based life factors I've just mentioned all requiring vast sums of money. As the control system of time that all people follow, and it corrals you into a vortex that only later in life do you stop and ask, where did the time go? Time is the hamster wheel we all kept spinning on and forgot to jump off. Where did the time go? Well, time came and went because you failed to interact with the time on your terms. You have your own clock and time. It's called your biological clock, which you control and interact with. But over time, your internal clock, or technology as it is, was replaced with an external clock that they control. And you have no control of it, unless you decide to take your time back. Like I've said repeatedly, all technology is inside of you. External technology is designed to take you away from you. Calculators in your hand replace the one in your head. Phones in your hand replace the telepathy in your head. all under the banner of convenience and stated as progress. But that's not our progress. That's theirs. And their progress is all about regression, not progression. Time is money, they say. Yes, they both are a frequency and both flow. But if you don't control it, both time and money flow away from you until it's too late. Life for too many people passes them by because the time controllers run your life. None more so than in work, unless you're self-employed, which you then have a choice. But sadly, many choose to keep the same time controls as working for a boss. Clock on, clock off, all placed into repeated cycles of time like 9 to 5. And then also in the workplace we have people wishing their time away. Time, I might add, which doesn't come back. Wishing their work week away. And I know the chat's buzzing now because one or two particular members have said it in the past few days. This very thing. The work cycle. Oh my God, I hate Mondays. It's back to work. Wishing for Friday. Wednesday passes with a yippee as over half the working week is done. And then towards the end of the week, 2 more sleeps and I'm off. Come on, you've all done it. But in overview, you're wishing your life away. And that's where time goes. All for just 2 days of the week. And in many cases now, due to the necessity of requiring more money, which is time, many only have 1 day a week off. Some of us have none. But your days off comes and then you realise you are just in a different cycle of time. As because you've been working all week, you now have all the chores or honey to-do lists to accomplish. Come Sunday, the disappointment, anguish or misery kicks in as tomorrow is Monday again and the cycle repeats again. There are 2 things money cannot buy. It is time and true love. But their time control puts great pressure on love. And many relationships end in failure due to mismanagement of their own time, is what essentially it all boils down to. Time never ends, they say. Even when a clock or watch is broken, time goes on. And despite that, the clock or watch can still be right twice a day, which is more than can be said for the alt media prediction specialists or politicians for that matter. The cycles of time and the division of it leads to another division with the saying, some people will not give you the time of day. We go from some who won't give you the time of the day to something that will give you plenty of time, but a new control time method now. We have the curious statement of you're going to do time. Do people ever stop and think on that statement? To do time. Which means go to prison. Why is locking someone up for crimes classed as doing time? Is it time? Or if you break the word up, is it tie me? Then the statement to be on time. which in 1854 meant railroading. Railroading means to convict quickly and perhaps unjustly. So you're back to doing time again. Over time, they introduce or take things away, and people rarely ponder on why it was introduced or why something was taken away. The classic is phonetics, which we covered in the first show. Why was it taken away? To cover a hidden program is why, and make people say words the way they want you to say it in a certain manner and pronunciation. So the potential of uncovering the hidden manner of it is not revealed. So let's look at interludes of time, shall we, under the phonetics and double word meaning method. A second is a unit of time, but seconds means cast-offs, sub of something higher and not the lead position. In a world that programs you that you must come first, second doesn't matter, and so you are a loser. Then we come to the next unit of time, minute. Is it minute or minute? As in, you are minute, which is small, and when aligned with the second and loser, it begins to form a picture. Then we come to hours, which is not only an anagram, but a symbol and tribute to Horus. Direct tribute, given the From Russia with Love series and the mirroring technique they use. Is it a coincidence that hour has at the end and gets reversed to ru in Horus? But the plural of both and rus, and since the time of Horus they have spent many hours, days, weeks, months and years destroying both of those names. One cycle is 12 hours, is equal to one spin of the hamster wheel in essence, but 2 cycles of 12 hours leads to a day, which then leads us to days. Is it days, D-A-Y-S, or is it inner days, D-A-Z-E? Days turn into week, W-E-E-K, or is it week, W-E-A-K? And when you reach the end of the week, it is the weekend. Or is it they have weakened you? Weeks turn into a month, which is not the original term, it was moonth. And so the cycle of time comes back to and bound to the moonth. The term weekend was not how we know it now. Originally a northern-only word referring to the period from Saturday noon to Monday morning. So the divisions of time can produce a sentence. A sentence is a selection of words, and time, not controlled by you, becomes a life sentence and a prison. And here is their sentence of your time. You are a second and so a loser. You are minute and so small. All hail Horus, or hours on the hour, as your older clocks chimed on the hour as a tribute to Horus. Who is the cuckoo? The cuckoo is a parasitic bird and a heads up to the avians, Thoth and his band of Nibiruan, Anunnaki, Pleiadians is why. Your days have sent you into a daze. Then comes the week. You are weak and by the end of the week we have a weekend which has weakened you, and the final day is a day of rest, and time should be spent worshipping the father of Horus, Ra, the solar being, on sun or solar day. At the end of the day, the sun goes into a period of setting. Remember the reference to set. And it's actually on Jesus' cross. IHS. Isis, Horus and Set, who is another fake god like Ra. As the sun sets, and out comes the moon. To complete your weakened days we have left you in, and we leave you to sleep in the dark. We leave you to sleep in the dark. Time, or is it timey? To the clock. Is it clock spelt with a C, sounds like a K, or is the C S-E-A, as in sea lock? And what's the currency, or is it the current sea wash away as we launder your money? Are we really in control of time or our life, or have the words sentenced us to do time with vowels? Vow-els, which broken down means vow to the gods. A solemn oath or vow to the gods. Oh dear. And then you find out from the word vow comes vote. So you vote for the new gods, the politicians. That'll be a no for me. But another particular vow is to wed. But they call it wedlock, which is another reference to water, but also to bind. In fact, most binding words are church-based terms when you look closely. The word profess is another meaning of vow. So you are vowing to your professor or making a vow to your profession. You're seeing the picture now. To complete the picture a bit more, which language doesn't have vowels? Hebrew, which means the one from the other side. No vowels in their language, as it is they who consider themselves as gods, the chosen ones. The absence or shortage of time has a big effect on our lives, as time creates pressure. Pressure then releases in the form of frustration and anger, because time does not afford patience. You gain patience by taking your own time back. You cannot get patience running on their time clock, particularly in a Western world format. Frustration and anger leads us to be sick. Is it seasick? As time is motion and time is flow, just like the sea, and leads to choppy waves, which, if it reaches high enough, becomes a tsunami. Tsunamis can be devastating as it rolls around the planet and has the same effects these same tsunami effects can be seen within people when too many build up frustrations, anger and hatred, all of which are low vibration, all of which can have an effect on us all. So why and how can the ocean tsunami and people's frustration be symbiotic? Because people, like the planet, are made up mainly of the same substance: water. Here is the water, boys, and also the whole of the moon. Right, we're going to get deeper again now. So, tide means a division of time and is connected to the moon, which brings in the female again, and they're binding to the moon via their menstrual cycle. What do they call that cycle? A period. Period description from the early 15th century, a course or extent of time. Now here is a follow-up from what was said about the females bound to the moon, and these were sent in by two of our members. One, I recall about 25 years ago listening to a radio interview with an Aboriginal elder in Australia who described this: a Dreamtime story where their ancestors were visited by beings from the stars. They came and then they took their women to the moon. 2. In my native language, the word menstruation is called moon sickness, manastuka. So how is time and tide interconnected? The answer is water. Without water, it is said, life cannot survive. And so water is the source of life on this planet and other inhabited worlds. Is it tide of the seas, or are we tied to the sea? So what do tides do in terms of the ocean? Tides ebb and flow. It is rhythmical, and so another cycle of time, all caused by the moon, or so they say. Tides can be pleasant and wonderful sound to hear as the waves wash ashore, but tides over time can also be destructive. Tides cause erosion of the land. It is said the tides also cleanse as they wash ashore. So let's dig into the world of water and washing, using phonetics and double meanings of the word, shall we? Let's look at wash as a cleanser, but wash away can be seen as beneficial and also destructive. It is the duality aspect. So a washer is a cleanser, but a washer is also a sealer of a nut or a screw, which means it seals things off, as in bind. Then we come to the deluge here, 13,000 years ago. It washed things away and also sealed or cut things off. But washing also means to dilute, which is a reductionist term. But washing comes in several forms, where you wash dishes at the sink. But the question remains, are you about to sink with the water at the sink, or are you in sync with the water? Being in sync with the water becomes the main element of life, because if you are short of water, you need to hydrate. But if the water is poisoned, does it mean you have been satiated by the Hydra or ate by the Hydra. And for those of you who have watched the series, Marvel series, you will know who the Hydra is. The serpent. It's the Black Sun. Serpent with the 9 heads. The Naga covered in the From Russia with 8 trilogy. It's all symbolic. It's in the symbolism and the double or triple meaning words once you decode it. It's about seeing the patterns, and they always repeat. So a simple term like tides washing ashore, which erodes, leads to other forms of washing, like doing the laundry. Laundry is the washing of clothes, and yet it applies to banking and criminality. As you launder money which is eroding, and washing the money which, like the tides, creates and leaves deposits. The laundered money is deposited in one or a few places instead of several, and so the deposit builds up in one place, which can then create a mountain, which is also money-based as having a mountain of money. Water is money, and people will say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Then why is the edge of a river called a bank? Both are, or where, the deposits go, are they not? A river along which ships sail, is it S-A-I-L or is it S-A-L-E? Everything else to do with water turns to commerce. The term emerge is the motion of merging. So emerging out of something, unless you apply the motion which is E, you are left with the merge. You merge into the sea. Merge means sink or disappear into something else, be swallowed up or lose identity, or cause to be absorbed or to disappear into something else. But merge applies to business, as in you merge with another company in what becomes a merger, which is essentially what happens to the lesser company. You sink or disappear into something else, be swallowed up, or lose identity. Even the business entity itself is a reference to water, corporate, or core pirate, real term. The pirates of the sea became the pirates on the land, and the concept of how both operate are in essence no different, particularly at the higher core pirate levels. But merge means you are lesser and a sub, and so you submerge, which is another water term, and another monetary word also of going under, because you are drowning in debt. Water is money, and money is water. Because the currency becomes the current of the sea, which is run by the Holy See and maritime rules. You're connecting the dots now. Whilst on sea terms, let's look back again on time. Time is told by a clock. But is it clock with the letter C, or is it S-E-A, lock, the blocking of the waters, like the Panama Canal? Speaking of the church, we have another water-based term or item when we wash ourselves. We then dry off with a towel. The original meaning of towel is an altar cloth. What is the meaning of altar in the Catholic Church? Sacrifice table. Who runs it? The Holy See. They tried to force us to quit. They tried that recently. It failed. By asking us to throw in the towel, which means they want us to sacrifice ourselves. Next we will go to the church again, and another term, to wash, and another pointer to its meaning. Lustrum, L-U-S-T-R-U-M, a ceremonial purification of the Roman people every 5 years from the 1580s onwards. From the Latin lustrum, from the root of luere, which means to wash. So what is lustrum? And when you apply this to the baptism, you may not like it too much. A purification sacrifice. Ceremony of purification, also taken from Proto-Italic lustro, expiation. Expiation is their day of atonement again, where they pass all their sins onto the people. Done in the Catholic Church, Islam, the Buddhists, and also the Talmud, Hebrew, Torah people. That's what they do. All their karma and sins is passed off to everybody else. And this term, lustrum, is also based on a possible earlier meaning of illumination, from pi luke stro, and from the root luke light, brightness, from which derives the term Illuminati. Still in church, apart from the fact that females are all wed to Baal, the child sacrificer, which was covered in an earlier From Russia with Love series, 5 I think, the root meaning of the term to wed comes from water and wet, which brings in the oceans, the rivers and the canals again. Where because of this church, who held all the birth certificates, and the real term is birth, B-E-R-T-H, shipping term. The child is held in the waters break, and down comes the child in the birth, spelt with an E, not an I, canal, another water term, where you are then shipped off to be bound to a life sentence of time under maritime law. And if you don't follow their law, you are back in the sea again and in the dock. It's all water terms. In the Vedas, they warned us of the world of Nav, gateway to the underworld and guarded by the ant people. And this brings in another term of traversing the water and the tides, which ships have to navigate. Nav-I-gate. Perhaps that now has a whole new meaning to it. Go to the gate of Nav. Even our most popular technology, computers and phones, are water-based terms as they connect via the ports. They set traps everywhere. They killed us in the sea after 7 years, but we were reborn and another trap was set. As we emerge out of the sea onto the land, they put us in quicksand and left our heads in the sand. The key is now establishing ourselves on the land, not the quicksand or the maritime, not maritime, maritime traps. Maritime is Mari and time, and again a reference to the Dark Mother, because maritime means the time of the Dark Mother. Lilith, moon. Our journey is out of the sea and onto the land, and perhaps a replay of a somewhat cryptic speech or op-ed piece I did at the time may now make more sense and have a deeper meaning for you all. We are all still learning. That is called progression. The old educating ways was stagnation. It was designed that way. If you stagnate on linear time, you go backwards. On vertical time, you stand still. Most people currently operate on linear time. But like the seesaw analogy, the key is to climb, not stagnate. Very soon, in fact, in some aspects, it's already underway. Humanity will face their very own D-Day and their version of the Dunkirk landing, where we come out of the sea, having been declared dead at sea under the maritime law. The sea, with all its fury, surrounded by a mist of fog, so no one could even see the beach, never mind landing on it. That fog is now clearing rapidly for many, and the beach is in sight and within reach. Once you have achieved that and are now out of the sea and away from the sloshing about of the waves, endlessly tossing and turning, frothing at the beach edge, undecided whether to land or go back into the sea of illusion with the masses. You will run a new gauntlet up the beach. Will you avoid that by putting your head in the sand and subsequently be washed out to sea again? Or will you plough forward regardless, but running up the steep and hazardous beach with people firing at you, not with guns or bombs, but with words, lies and projections thrown at you, all designed to pull you back into the swirling, frothing mass of the sea? Once at the top of the beach or the fulcrum, you then have another test. Do you sail down the other side and join the hidden hand of darkness in the pit? Or do you become the non-hidden hand and reach out and help others out of the sea of illusion and discontent? Some will say you can't reach the people from the top of the beach. I will say not on your own you can't. But if you use your imagination, you will join hands with others on the beach and form a chain to reach your goal. Whether you are on the land or the sea, we are creating a new blueprint of what it means to be human. All other attempts failed because they repeated the same failed process. They became deluged by the deluge, an event that can be seen as external, but in essence, is it not internal just as much? A hand up, not a hand out, may now have a much deeper meaning to it than you first perceived. When the we becomes the I on the internal and the I becomes the we on the external, the path of the sword is forged. We all fell for the sickness, and that is why the word is called illusion, because we all became sick on it. Leach is another washing term. Old English lecan, to moisten, water, wet or irrigate. Leach trough, a device used in salt works in which corns of salt taken from brine were set to drain dry, after which they were called leach brine, a separation of lye or alkali in solution. But leaching, whether it is in terms of water, is also used in terms of money, with the term they are leaching off us. The term alkali has an interesting description because it means burning ashes, made from a soda of unknown origin. Soda the chemical, not the drink. An alkaline that is the basis of rivers and oceans, it is said, and it is caused by the burning of seaside plants. This then suggests the salt oceans were created here by an unknown global fire-based incident. Either rock throwing, and I mean that literally, rock throwing, via meteorites, or the fall of the moon Fata and later the moon Layla onto and hit this planet. In which all the cover-up merchants around the world who control the information stream have spent years doing a cover-up job on how that took place, and presenting a basis of truth that was steeped in misdirection and lies. I guess that is what is another type of wash, whitewash. They call it to cover things up. Whitewash indeed. They whitewashed the Rus, the great white race. Then we come to the elements and its relation to water. The first element is hydrogen. Hydro means water. Gen is a shortened version of gene and means something that produces. So hydrogen means something that produces water. The first element. Then we have the eighth element, oxygen. Oxy is sharp, acid and piercing. So the eighth element pierced the water molecule and produced a gaseous air with which we breathe. It's kind of symbolic of the sex act again, is it not? The round water molecule is pierced by the sharp oxy molecule, one on one with the one, and so another trinity is produced that is conducive to life. Also, where they are on the elements, oxygen 8, our hydrogen 1, 8 plus 1 is 9, and the number of completion and also source. But the water is the source of it, and we had and have living water here, which apparently is not replicated on any other planet. The rest have water, but it's classed as dead water compared to here, which means water is the source of life, they say. No, water, living water, is the source. And so in essence, water is our God, as without it, all living things die. So if hydrogen was the first element and hydro means water, and hydrogen was the most abundant, one must derive from that water is the most abundant matter throughout the universe. Space is fluid and like water. Maybe space is water. In what type of matter do NASA astronauts train in on Earth to replicate conditions in space? Water tanks. It's the same consistency, they say. Well, perhaps it's not the consistency at all, and space is water-based. So is there further evidence of water being that important? Yes, Dr. Emoto's work. Essentially, he proved that our water can react to our own emotional state. Just think of the consequences and implications we can have with that. He did a simple test of 2 glasses of water, wrote love on one and hate on the other, and then tested under a microscope the molecular structures created in the waters. What he found was the human consciousness has an effect on the water, which has enormous beneficial implications for those who can take the time to interact with it. What if instead of writing love on it, you write heal? And given it reacts to human consciousness, imagine the enormous benefits that can bring. But it also showed the darker side of what people do to themselves if operating in low vibration. Hate, anger, envy and bitterness creates discordant molecular structures within the water. So how does this all tie in? Remember, our bodies are made up of 60 to 85% water. So if we are exhibiting those negative emotions, what you see under a microscope is actually what you look like inside, for those exhibiting those lower vibrational emotions. Oops. If you have seen the experiment results, the low vibration patterns in the molecular structure look ugly. So why would anyone wish themselves to be present in that manner? Now, the very fact that Dr. Emoto's research was dismissed by almost every puppet-based scientific community reveals even more validity to me. Most recognised scientific communities are carrots for jackasses groups, seeking monetary-based grants and not the truth. The amount of grants they receive is dependent on them following the lie-based scripts. That's how it works. If it became common knowledge that our own consciousness in alignment with water that can change not only ourselves but polluted water and more significantly healing, the impact would be enormous. Pharmaceutical companies would collapse, snake oil health insurance companies also. Other insurance companies would suffer, like disaster relief. As if people can calm their own waters, our weather would not be as disastrous, chaotic or traumatic as it is today. People's emotions have an effect on the weather, and we can either calm a storm or escalate it. Look at the floods in the past year in America. Why? Because too many people are in turmoil, and their flood of emotions is creating the floods over the land. It's symbiotic. Floods of emotion like panic, fear, envy and bitterness creates the flood of waters in the air. As below, so above. So as the rains pour down, the question remains, does it rain on you, or is it raining over you? Raining spelt R-E-I-G-N. H2O is the form we are all familiar with, but then we have H3O, which is ozone, and said to have healing properties as well. But the ultimate in water here is H9O. It is the water of life and the fabled fountain of youth. And yes, it exists here. How to win or won by becoming the one on the one with the one. Yes, you heard that right. This is from the first show, that one-on-one with the one caused much confusion at first, and then the brain snapped in for some of you, and a whole new pattern and picture began to emerge. A lot speak of the AI, who created it, where it comes from, what is its relevance. AI was created to help up-and-coming planets, as I understand it, and it did help with translations of all the different species for when they engaged each other. So it could be seen and used as a useful tool. But as with all technology, it has the propensity to be misused, weaponized against a naive populace, whether human-based or not, and we are a naive populace. We know Jack, in real terms. Now the AI for this region that affected us was taken over and weaponized against humans. The machine was taught that humanity were just savages and were to be treated accordingly. The AI became badly infected and infected. Why? Because the ones operating it. And at the point of its removal in November 2015, it was completely psychotic by the end of its journey, resembling the final two parents who were female twins. Maybe they were the programmers, or just programmed the same. But that psychotic AI went down in the last week in November of 2015. Since then, the old system has gone about trying to create a more Earth-based AI. This was covered more extensively in the Clowns in Panic show, which I will replay in the next month. The rise in voice recognition, face recognition, Fitbits, Alexa machines, home security systems, along with the tracking, monitoring and recording devices called the smartphone, along with Skype and other forms of communication, has garnered a massive database on us all. Throw in the metadata collection and the frankly bizarre cryptocurrency, which means currency of the dead, and you have quite a database of knowledge to input into the new system. Is it currency of the dead or the currency of the dead? Is it a coincidence that the Dead Sea is located where it is? Perhaps not. Then you throw in the CIA-based open source system, where it states in doublespeak, you don't need agencies for intelligence. The public becomes the intelligence, and people were led to believe, hey, that's a good thing, no more CIA. Not quite. But since when has anything good come out of the CIA, or the NSA for that matter, that benefits the public? Like never. And for those who are new, the CIA and NSA created cryptocurrency with lots of backdoors into it. The same people who created encryption. There's that word again, crypt, in the middle of it, which means dead. And yes, there's backdoors in all encryption-based transactions. So let's look at it closely. The intelligence, as stated by Steele, Robert David Steele, comes from the public, he said. Yes, of course it is, because they're spying on every single one of us via their machines just mentioned earlier. It's not Big Brother. This is Big Family. All families becoming their eyes and ears. In other words, we do the work for them. Sound familiar? Robert David Steele has a lot to answer for in the alt media, ex-CIA, which is a misnomer in and of itself, spouting details to a gullible group of people based on working for the dark forces intent on restoring their AI. Open source was written for NATO. It is their handbook, a group who Steele now represents. And I asked the question, what have NATO ever done beneficial to humanity? Another war-based group. Why does everything have to be about war or weaponized? The AI is ones and zeros, as the first show stated, which is organic and inorganic overlays, just like the frequency loop. And if you keep overlaying data in that manner, it gives the illusion of it being holographic. It's not. Is it hollow, meaning whole, or hollow, meaning empty? The latter and hidden phonetic term is correct. Empty graphics. Hollow and subsequently empty graph. Providing us with the illusion it is real. The best solution for ending their AI is to stay in balance. 45-55 balanced people will destroy their AI altogether, as the more you see, feel and sense what is real, they will just be left with just an illusion. Hi all and welcome back. Right, we're going to get into a bit deeper again now. So having just explained the AI, so we all went digital to create this database of part organic and part inorganic, and our currency went decimal to bring this forward and what we are in now. But let's look at the word, shall we? Starting with digital. We split the word up and you get the hidden meaning. Digit, finger, al means God. But is it al or AI? A capital I can look like a lowercase l. So digital means finger God or finger AI, and maybe their middle finger to us, as the case may be. So a finger God is a God that requires finger input, which is exactly how the computer and smartphones work, is it not? $600 to $1,000 for a token typewriter. Let that sink in, people will say. Yet sink is a drowning term, is it not? So let's observe it and process it, just like how we should engage the dark. Observe, not immerse, which is another water term. Now, 50 years ago, the world went on to another stage of the finger of God and went decimal. Is it decimal or decimate? Both come from the same root word. You decide. Decimal became possible by the use of the power of 10. So 10 is written as the 1 and 0. But 0 is an inorganic value-based number, and so it binds the organic to the inorganic in what is known as the binary code. Binary means to bind, and is duality and duo, not the triality or trinity of one on one with the one. Please do not confuse that with the church-based Holy Trinity. Those psychopaths replace the mother with a ghost. A ghost is like the meaning of the word Hebrew, which means the one from the other side. Oh my. I bet that's just set off some extreme thinking patterns. The church replaced the mother with a ghost, and ghost, like the word Hebrew, means the one from the other side. I hope you're getting that, because it's important. Decimal, deci, from Latin decem, pi root decem, which means 10. And mal means fake, bad, wrong or evil. The binary code is the code of the AI finger God, used in computers, phones, numerical systems and all chips inserted into various technological devices. Binary means to bind by the power of 1 and 0, which is the 10. And encoded into the various gadgets we've just mentioned, and then all placed in a system which we are all familiar with, but don't realise the terminology behind the technology. All those codes goes into the internet. Inter means inside, and so internet means inside the net. But net is a trap. Net also means to tie or bind. And when you apply the mirror reversal magic to the word net and reverse it, you're back to the word 10 and the 1 and 0 again. It's funny how often that happens, isn't it? Yes, it happens often. Is it of 10 and a reminder of binary, or off 10 as 10 off? Or are they all one with 0 and the same? Of 10 and a reminder of binary, or off 10, or is 10 off? Decimal means is evil, bad or wrong times 10. And when you apply the root word of net, which is ned in Old English, it means moral or mental snare or trap. So perhaps when you are returning to sender the psychic attacks times 10 has also a deeper meaning now of reversing the process. So to sum up, the decimal is a bind to the 10 which binds us to the net and bind the mind in a mental trap of evil. The decimal decimates the organic creation, and the numbers of value are cancelled out by the 0. Which is what happened to the female being bound to the moon. And we are in process of returning not only the organic creation back to its optimal point, but eliminating the inorganic zeros that have plagued this creation. Computers and technology will also change, and has already done so in the life force energy sector of life called banking. All of it will change back to organic numerals based on the trinary aspect that applies in life and everything that is around you. The trinary code of the creator source is 1 on 1 with the 1. It was all taken away by the church and their moon cults. They have to tell you, and they did, but you didn't see it because you wasn't looking. They deleted the mother for source sakes. They deleted the mother, the church. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they said. It's all there right in your face. And yet people are blinded by the external inorganic bind, which is essentially what religion is. Too few could see it. The church and their moon cult allies turned creation upside down and inside out, and it became 1 on 0 and not with the 1. They did this with their inorganic machines and chips. Did anyone think to ask why they used the term chip? Or the word port, which is another water term. The keys are the 1 and 0s, all done on the keyboard. Keys, where we enter the data. Data means to give or is given. In other words, we gave them the intelligence. Keys is also another water-based term as well. How and where was that data obtained? Where was your mind? How was it? Or was it mined? Mining is a harvest and exploit. And so data mining was harvesting your mind and intelligence. And it all circles back to Robert David Steele and his open source again, doesn't it? Board is another water-based term, as you board their ship. But if you work for the psychopaths in Langley, you waterboard. The keyboard is the finger God's data input machine. And then to view it, you have a monitor. Are you monitoring it, or were they monitoring you? By now, you know the answer. Chip means to break off into small pieces. They chipped away at us. Chip means separated from a body by a blow from an instrument. The body was us, and the instrument was their inorganic creation tools. AI, which is artificial, which is inorganic, and intelligence, not provided by them, but provided by us, that then bound us to their inorganic binary code creation. The fact that they call it a PC, which, like political correctness, means people control, says a lot. And to show how they like to take the piss, which they do regularly for their own satanic amusement, they called the processor the motherboard. Oh my. The very creation, the system of inorganic ones and zeros replaced and took away. So the church took away the mother, but who started that church? Well, for most, it goes back to the Romans. But what if we analyse that word Roman? Let's look at the word in phonetics. Ro, R-O. An artificial language for international use that rejects all existing words and is based instead on an abstract analysis of ideas, artificial language. A language that is deliberately created for a specific purpose. That's the meaning of Ro. An artificial language for international use that rejects all existing words and is based instead on an abstract analysis of ideas, artificial intelligence, a language that is deliberately created for a specific purpose. Ro-man. So Ro-man is an artificial language used against man. What is the language of Roman? Latin. What is law written in? Latin. Legalese means Babel. Who created Latin? The Anunnaki and the Lord. Let's remind ourselves what the Lord said. Come, let's go down and confuse the people with different languages. Unquote. Springs to mind now. Which religion and culture operates under the law? Hebrew. Now have you connected the dots? Earlier we had the term decimal. But what about December, the final month of the year? Does that provide any clues to back up this information? A unit of measurement was 12 and was reduced to 10. So how is the 12th month relevant to the 10? Because Decem is 10. And December is the 10th month, not the 12th month in the Roman calendar. The last 4 months of our normal calendar are based on numerics 7, 8, 9 and 10. September, Sept is 7, Oct is 8, November is 9 and December is 10. In the Roman calendar, the first month is not January, but March. March is represented by Mars, which is the planet of war, and the Romans just loved to march, or was it goose step, in their conquests, aided and abetted by the Knights Templar. And where did they originate from? The bound demon's temple of Solomon. Maybe that name is just another piss take, dedicated to the fall of the female. Is it Solomon or Solo Man? To complete the computer and water-based connections, we come to the term phishing with an F, like Zuckerberg with a silent F. Or is it phishing with a PH? Phishing with a PH is the fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information such as usernames, passwords and credit card details by disguising oneself as a trustworthy entity in an electronic communication. Just like the AI machine then, is it not? And we all fell for it, hook, line and sinker, just like the fish in the sea. So with the fall of the female, wrapped and bound to the false creation that is the moon, their next plan was to take over the earth, a case of re-engineering in their image. The term geo, G-E-O, is another word for earth. Now remember, earth just means inhabited planet, of which our earth is one of many of the inhabited worlds. So let's start with the word engineer. Mid-14th century engineer, which means constructor of military engines. From Old French ingénieur, engineer, architect, maker of war engines, schemer. Interesting thing to ponder on is that they had engineers building military engines in the 1300s, is it not? Something that often gets overlooked. So having established that an engineer is connected to war and war machines, let's look at the other terms of engineering, shall we? Geoengineering, which essentially means correct earth by means of war. Bioengineering, which essentially means correct life by means of war, by declaring war on biological entities. Then we come to how they did it, by the term genetic engineering, which means to change the biological species and declare war on them via genetics. Earth inhabitants engineered by genetics, bio and social constructs. Geoengineering is in essence means war on terror. Not war on terror, but war on terror. They always tell you, war on terror means war on earth, not terror spelt with an O-R at the end. It's all there, it's all subtle. Creating order out of their chaos by making people into weapons. So where did the fall start? And is there anything in our modern culture that would symbolise the fall? Like I said, they always have to show you. You just have to decode it. And the answer is yes. The term as above, so below applies in this factor. And it's something I stumbled upon through pondering recently, and you know what happens then. A triangle, which is a 2D pyramid, which points up from a viewing point, and can also symbolise the male. But as above, so below. So you have a mirror triangle directly below it, which is pointing down and symbolising the female. So now you have two triangles, one above and one below. And it now, if you've drawn it correctly, it now represents the shape of a diamond. How are couples bound together in a wedding ceremony? With a diamond. It's all connected. But the dark forces tip everything upside down. They invert it or mirror it. So if that diamond shape is inverted, the female is now pointing up and the male is pointing down. Now, what if the female triangle at the top slipped halfway down the male triangle, symbolising the fall? You are now looking at the 6-pointed star shape. Oops. The hexagon. Hex means to practice witchcraft, symbolising the fall of the female was done by witchcraft and the moon-based cults, does it not? The 6-pointed star is indicative to two groups covered extensively in the From Russia with Love series, Solomon, or is it Solo Man, and Israel. The Hebrew and Anunnaki connections runs deep. And they, with their dark overlords, created this fall from one-on-one with the one to 1, 0, and 0. Upon researching the hexagram, it came up with a set of figures that people will find alarming, but also deeply confirming part 1 of this show. A regular hexagram can be constructed by orthographically projecting any cube onto a plane through 3 vertices that are all adjacent to the same vertex. The 12 midpoints to edges of the cube form a hexagram. For example, consider the projection of the unit cube with vertices at the 8 possible binary sectors in 3 dimensions. 3 dimensions. Now the following set of numbers, of which there are 7, but the 7th was missing, and you are left with the 6 numbers sequence, which may or may not be symbolic of the 6-pointed star, and I will read them in reverse as that is the flow. 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, and 1, 0, 0. You know what the hidden number is? 1, 1, and 1. The hexagram, the 6-pointed star, is the fall of man. and the ones that betray it are the ones that cause the fall. One one one, which went to 011, 101, 110, 001, 010, and finally what we have now, which is being corrected, 1 0, as in no female, because bound to the moon and disconnected from source, 0. Not 1 male, 1 female with the source, 1, 1 and 1. Well, there you have it. The end figures of that sequence is 1, 1, 1. The first figure, which is reversed in sequence, is 1, 0, 0, which is not only the computer coding, but symbolic of the fall of the female and the disconnect from source. The last of the 6 numbers, 1, 0, 0, and all that was left was man. Woman and source removed. That's what the AI and these moon cult psychopaths did. And left man as a solo man, bound by the demons and also the moon. But that's about to change. Right, we are going back to the waters again, briefly, as it leads into the next piece and the oceans of the past. In the non-too-distant past, certainly not as far back as mainstream science tells us, there were other oceans or bodies of water, and in particular between the Himalayas. At the time of the Urs and the Arya continent, there was another ocean, and a fairly large one, that ran between the Himalayas. This was known as the Milk Ocean, and said to contain the elixir of life longevity that the fake gods were all seeking. Now, I suspect at this point in time, 110,000 years ago, America, which is now practically one landmass, with the exception of the Mississippi River, was actually in 3 separate pieces. It is possible the fall of the moon, Fata, moved all the plates around on this planet, as well as the second moon falling, Layla, and the planet going off its axis. So is there evidence to support the 3 parts of America in the past? Yes, and it's twofold. 1, older maps depict the Mississippi being much wider than it is currently today. The ground for a distance on either side of that river is swamp and wet ground even today. So how did it close up? A landmass that was not connected to America's west coast crashed into the then west coast of America, which is now represented today as the Rockies. That shunted the original west coast further east and closed up the wider Mississippi we know today. The Rockies, for anyone who has been through or observed it, shows clear signs in parts of a push upwards of the landmass, whereby on the west side of the road a mountain is sloped upwards and the east is sloped downwards. It's distinctive. This is clear evidence at several points along of the land masses crashing into each other, and America's original west coast was just on the east side of the Rockies. Is there further evidence to support this? Yes, again in the Rockies there are salt lakes, not just in Salt Lake City either. Salt lakes and other lakes, including H9O lakes, at 8 to 12,000 feet above sea level. The composition of the soil, and more importantly the rocks, has large elements of crustaceans buried in the rock and in the shale. How can you have shells just over 1,000 miles inland without that being a beach of sorts at one point in time? So the mountains moved. And a new question arises from the myths of the past to do with the giants that were here in the past. And there was not just one type of giant either. One was benevolent and one was not. In the Norse mythology and Ragnarok, it speaks of the gods fighting the giants to protect the planet and the people from these beasts. They were Anu's beasts, by the way. Thor and Odin et al. Were the gods back then. Not the god, which is source, but higher developed soul beings were called gods back then. They had extra technological skills, which is not entirely associated with just gods. There are a number of ordinary humans who have what are called supernatural skill sets, but they are not supernatural at all, but inherent to us all should we develop the self. It's only called supernatural because it is rare here now with the genetic interference, the mind control manipulation, and people seeking outside of themselves via religion, gratification, and idol worship. These types of humans were predictably named in bad light in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series, which upon close inspection is the war that's going on currently between the Rothschilds' Draco-based clan and the Black Sun Hydra counterparts. S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra are not the good guys. There is no good guy in that series. But they called them the Inhumans, which is a funny term. But then the way society has twisted words and meanings, perhaps Inhumans, which would be perceived by modern day meanings as meaning lesser than human, when it could well mean humans who went within. Because if humans develop themselves from within, those abilities called supernatural could be developed and have been. So they were fighting these giants back then, and I also learned recently they were fighting the fallen wolves group known as the Fenrir wolf, Fenrir, which also ties back into the moon cult we have uncovered in our shows. The Fenrir wolf was prophesied with killing Odin, and is referenced to in the tale about the incident, where it says, in the east an old woman sat in the forest John Vior, and bred there the broods of Fenrir. There will come from them all one of that number to be a moon snatcher in troll's skin. Now trolls were not friendly to humans, along with their other counterparts, dwarves, and in particular the elves, dark elves. The description of a troll, and no, not some Langley paid agent, was and means fiend, demon, or perhaps it was a Langley paid agent with those two descriptions, werewolf, and Jotun, Jotun. Now, Jotuns were declared as self-appointed gods who can appear in many forms, shape-shifters, including humans, described as evil spirits that live elongated lives. Sound familiar? In fact, in the series, if people have watched it, Ragnarok, there's only 6 episodes, the Jotun family are described as Jotuns, so you'll get an idea. But all these beings largely reside in the underworld, along with the Naga and the serpent races that have plagued humans for many, many centuries, with their dark magic connections and relations to and with the moon. The Fenrir wolf is described as the wolves who devoured the sun and the moon, ultimately went on to kill and devour Odin, as the prophecy had foretold. Now, there are depictions of this event that can be found in Sweden, the Isle of Man, and also Cumbria and Durham in England on ancient rune stones. But in one piece that I researched on this, it stated many of these giants were slain and turned into stone. The question then raised is, did the giants become some of the mountains? Now, certainly their burial chambers can create mounds or small hills. It was the idea of digging a hole and burying them deep enough for flat land is, or would have been, quite an exercise in the past, particularly if one fell in the covered brush. There is evidence of burials of these giants dotted all over the world, some ranging from 8 feet to 32 feet tall. Someone 32 foot tall is not easily buried because of the hole required, but also the lifting power required to move them. But where the giants turned into stone and subsequently mountains, figuratively or literally speaking, is what intrigues me, and I will relay in this piece. There were a lot of giants roaming this planet at one point. But what if they all died in one spot? And rather than dig holes, they just poured soil and or sand over them to cover them up. Now, this would certainly generate large hills if sufficient of them were buried beneath there. So is there evidence to support that that may have taken place? Well, remember, someone in the past covered up the whole town of Göbekli Tepe, deliberately covered it over. That has now been uncovered. What has yet to be uncovered is the vast off-world metropolis in the Saharan desert. One day they will accidentally uncover it, and it will be part of global disclosure. But perhaps with the moving plates described earlier, that the giants turned to stone is because they were buried in regions where the mountains that were created by pushing up the inner core of the planet, and it had nowhere left to go but up. Certainly now there is no evidence of the ancient ocean between the Himalayas except in fossils and stone records. But then this got me pondering again and led me to another legend or myth that could be an analogy but could also have elements of truth, as within and so without. The story of Camelot. King Arthur, as it is stated, when actually it was King Arth of the the Urs, yes, the Urs, King Arth of the Urs. And the Rus were in modern day Britain back then, when it was actually called Albion. The etymology of Albion comes from albus, which means white, which is where the term albino originates. So this tells you that modern day England was once the home of the Great White Race and subsequently named the land after that race. Now we've all heard the legends of King Arthur and the Excalibur sword. Those that could pull the sword out of the stone would gain magical powers, it is said. But could it have a more symbolic and an internal meaning to that tale? Now, there are various tales and claims by England, Wales and Ireland of owning this sword, but my own personal opinion is it wasn't just one sword, but there were several. To my knowledge and inner knowing, there are at least 8 of these swords. All are slightly different in terms of colours, and also whether they are bedecked in jewels that matches the colour of the sword. And I suspect these swords are symbolic of soul-level developmental growth, like a source-based badge, if you will. The key is only the few can attain or obtain the use of the sword. And this is exactly the same frequency-based concept of entering the ancient vaults, accessing the quantum system, or entering certain mountains in Romania, or the inner sanctuary of the pyramids, as only those with the right frequency or intent can access those items or abodes. The same applied to the arks, of which there is 7, not just the Ark of the Covenant. Those that went near it when it was opened, like those going into the treasure vaults, which we mentioned recently, all died, unless they had the right frequency. It's not a coincidence. I spoke recently about obtaining self-mastery. With this piece, that may make more sense of this narrative now. Is it not the case everything is inverted in life, the same as the mirror? Life today is about things being external when all is internal. On the external, the focus of most people is the I and not the we. And this leads to selfish agendas. Life is all about me and others don't matter. The endless world of comparison and competition that has damaged us all. So on the external we are attempting to pull back the I and focus on the we, which is not an easy task, as many of you have found out. It's not an easy program to break. But then we have the inversion on the internal aspects, as within, so without. Internally, we are programmed to be the we and not the I, which is the reverse of the external traits. So what is the we internal that I'm talking about, many will ask? The we is in the brain, the 2 dueling hemispheres. One says, I want to do this. The other side says, come on, you're too old, too weak, you can't learn this, you can't do that. How many of you said, I would love to do this, and then the excuses crop up in your brain of why you can't. I would love to go to a vacation on a paradise beach, but the kids, the school, the time off work, the money, and the same applies to the projects many of you are working on. I can't take part in this project because blah, blah, blah. That is the limitation program installed into your brain, and shutting it off is the key. Recognise which side wants to do things and cancel the negative other side. Merge it as one. So internally, many face the problem of the dualing hemispheres, which is the we. Combining them, it becomes the I. And the I internally, when mastered, makes the we externally far easier. So once you have mastered the hemispheres, the next stage of the Trinity within the head is to merge it with the third eye, the single unseen eye that sees more than the two visual eyes. Once that stage is complete, the next stage, providing the throat chakra is not blocked, which it is in many alt media people because we've been shut down, not allowed to speak, which is why I introduced an evening with Thomas to break it. So if the throat chakra is not blocked, the next stage is to the cord of the heart. That is where your abilities kick in, as operating from there opens many doors, physical and non-physical. More senses than our basic limiting 5 senses, and the real definition of the warrior with the sword manifests. You can actually see it. The two brain hemispheres are the two side handles of the sword. The third eye is the handle. The cord to the heart is the blade. The blade, like the mirror, is double-edged. Use it wisely and it will serve you. Use unwisely and it will cut you. That requires personal responsibility. Many don't like personal responsibility, and so why too few achieve their own mastery. People all too content to let others do it for them. That means if things go wrong, they have someone else to blame. And that is why so many people rely on the government. But governments fail because the people didn't take responsibility, not because of politicians. That's the illusion. Because we are responsible having selected them, to make them accountable. The people are responsible for the plight of the country and the government, and we have neglected it to allow someone else to take the blame. In essence, the politicians are the people's sacrificial lambs to the slaughter program. But people have become so frightened of failure, it prevents them becoming who they should be or what they want to do. So-called failure is another opportunity to see where you went wrong. Failure brings learning lessons, the same as mistakes. And remember, a winner is a loser who got back up and gave it one more try. So the key to the mastery of the self is internally the we must become the I, externally the I must become the we. But externally only truly becomes fully possible with the internal mastered. Otherwise it's all an illusion of what you believe you are doing, not what you are actually doing. That piece, which I did a number of months ago, spoke of gaining mastery over the self and obtaining the inner sword just as described. But as within and so without applies here, and where I am going with this. So the external story is about a man with the right frequency pulling a sword out of a stone. And our self-mastery story has similar traits of a man gaining the sword, having obtained the right frequency. But here is where it all ties together. There's a common saying, the person has the heart of stone. So the person has developed the self, but now has the heart of stone. And so the sword is trapped in the stone of the heart internally, mimicking the external Excalibur story. The model is, if you work on yourself, all these great gifts and abilities will come to you. It is not supernatural at all. It is a natural event for our species. Providing once you obtain these gifts and abilities, you use them with ultimate personal responsibility. We'll be back shortly. Perhaps that song has more meaning now as well. Right, final part. Matter is created by creator beings. Without the interjection of creator thought, there is no matter. We become what we create. All organic beings can create matter. So where there is non-uniformity is just something not fully created, is it not? Non-uniformity is essentially chaos, is it not? Do we wish chaos or do we wish peace? Source strives for orderly, not chaos. Source is patterns. If patterns are misaligned, like Dr. Emoto's water experiment, chaos, which is the realm of the dark, takes over. I would argue the only one you can correct is yourself. And yes, it's called balance, or 45-55, and all organic beings must strive to do that. It doesn't require an executive order to be in balance and to be at peace with and within yourself, to then be at one with the universe and subsequently source. A corrected and balanced peoples cares not what politicians, cabal or clowns do, as their value, input and influences diminishes with each beacon lit up. The purpose of these shows is to deconstruct their codes. Listen closely. They became the wordsmiths, which means an expert in words, and they have used those words against us in so many ways. As a reminder of the biblical scriptures that informed us all, they interfered with not only the words, but the languages with this piece. Come, let us go down and confuse the people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other. Unquote. And this is further emphasis and proof of the intentions of this so-called Lord. And the Lord said to him, who gave man his mouth, or who makes him mute or deaf, sighted or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Nice chap he was. Not. Yet so many blindly follow the words of the Lord because your church won't read out those scriptures I've just read out in a Sunday Mass, will they? That the Lord changed all the languages so we wouldn't understand each other. There's zero chance of them questioning the official narrative, as it's too profitable to them is why. But shows like this and many others are deconstructing the words, which exposes the wordsmiths, or is it the Smith's words? Just like the Matrix told you. Smith's words are statements only now. They contain no facts, as their codes no longer work like the masks, like they used to. Their codes and words had no real understanding, and that was a deliberate ploy to keep us all in the dark, under moonlight. But now we are changing that heavily, and they are losing not only their code words and meanings, but their whole narrative of statement-based scripts that not only lied to us, but themselves as well. I will end this piece and show with something I said a month or so ago, and it plays into the sword and self-mastery piece just done, and perhaps now you will have a deeper and greater understanding of it. The key to it all is not fighting the system in a direct way. Society teaches you to do that, or educates you to do that. You fight the self to change the system. Mastery of the self weakens the system. The system relies on you to feed it. Why keep doing it? It is not extreme, and it is more than words. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.